Start that recording. So Earth Day Dialogue, Sustainability and Flourishing in the 21st Century. And my name is Todd Lavasser. I'm the director of our Quality Enhancement Plan on Sustainability and Literacy as a Bridge to Addressing 21st Century Problems. This is the final event for that institutional-wide project, which was designed to bring sustainability literacy across the curriculum of the college and in co-curricular contexts. And so I want to start with just thanking some people who have helped over the last 5 years of this project. And Clayton was actually the very first speaker for our very first Sustain Fest for this. It came in, and Germaine also was a speaker at a Sustain Fest. So exciting to wrap this up with some people I very much respect on what they'll share with you tonight. So I wanted to thank Brian Fisher and Political Science, whose idea became this project that I'm wrapping up. Divya Bhatti, Karen Roof, Shushan Zhang, Josh Bloodworth, and the Office of Institutional Effectiveness, who helped build this project up, 100-page document guiding it. Gia Casada, who's wrapping it up. Dan Dickinson, who did all these boxes over 5 years with the help of student interns. Krista Well, the Women's and Gender Studies, did a lot of programming with them. Bernard Harris, of the Office of Institutional Diversity, who is co-sponsoring Clayton's visit over these last few days of the semester as well. And then Bob Mignon and Jerry Cabot, who helped develop a lot of the curricular ideas. Yeah, please, y'all coming in, tons of seats, make yourself comfortable. A lot of faculty fellows have helped with this project too. Steve Germaine, geology, Deb Bidwell, biology, Kendall Dees, Jen Wright, psychology, Meta Van Sickle, and then also Barry Stiefel, and then some assessment fellows led by Allison Welch and Matt Allen. And then in the Center for Sustainable Development, staff over the years, Ashley Lavender, Katie Ford Smith, and currently its director, Darcy Everett, and then Jen Jones, and some amazing, amazing student interns. For those of you students on campus who want to get into space, again, go to the Center for Sustainable Development's website. They're hiring some summer interns even. Sophie's one of them. She can talk to you about those experiences. So yeah, definitely wanted to give thanks to those and many other people who I just don't have time to get to talking to. And I want to start with now moving into a land and labor acknowledgement, which is becoming common practice in parts of the States. Also Canada, there's a lot of discourse around this. Australia, this is going on a lot with countries. So I want to recognize that where we are right now was on landscapes that were sacred to the Cuso Natchez, Edisto, Kiowa peoples, right? And through settler colonialism, which is a term you'll hear tonight, especially from Clayton, right? Uninvited colonizers came and dispossessed violently those peoples from their landscape and their understanding of the flora and fauna of this bioregion that they had developed sacred relationships with. So we are on unceded lands sacred to those people. And also we're on a campus whose labor was through enslaved people and the descendants that built this unacknowledged labor to build this campus as well. So a lot of work at the College Trust and to recognize these unsustainable practices of violent dispossession. And we'll talk about that some tonight. And so, Kennae, do you want to bring us into a grounding real quick after that?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I want to invite you to adjust your posture whatever way feels comfortable to you. That could be slouching, that could be sitting up, whatever feels most authentic to your body. I'm a yoga teacher by nature, so we're going to get comfortable. I want to invite you, if you haven't, to try to uncross your legs, place your feet squarely on the ground, maybe close your eyes or soften your gaze if that feels comfortable to you. And just for a moment, we want to draw our presence to this space. To begin to notice the breath that is present with you in this moment. You begin to draw awareness to the soles of your feet, wherever you are connecting to the earth. Knowing not only are we talking about and negotiating our existence with nature, but reconnecting to the idea that we are one and the same. So just as the air flows through our body, as we take each breath, as we are present with each breath, we will never have that same breath again, much like the air that flows around us when we're outdoors. As you stay connected with the breath, I want to remind you or invite you to draw your awareness to your heart space, knowing that there is your heart, the heat, the fire, the passion, that as your heart beats individually, you're also here collectively with the rest of humanity. In the same heartbeat, the same heat in our chest, is that the same at the core of the earth. And then whenever you're ready, slowly begin to blink your eyes open. Maybe take a look around you. Maybe the room that you're in, the seat that you're in, the faces that you see, so that we're presencing ourselves in community with all of the people that are here with us now.
So again, welcome to our Earth Day now. Thank you for that. So a bit more introduction, and then I'll let you know who's with us. And then the flow of the event will be everybody will do a quick 5-minute overview of the sort of sustainability, building community, activism, entrepreneurship, critique, analysis of settler colonialism and its offshoots of the panelists. And then we can start talking together, riffing off each other. And then at 7, we'll stop, slow it down, and then open up to the whole group to ask questions of. So that's the flow until we're done. So if there's some questions that pop in your mind, you want to ask anybody, jot it down as they're talking to each other. And then at the end, it'll be open floor to ask those questions. So I direct a project that's wrapping up, and will continue in some other way on sustainability, which is defined as social, environmental, economic systems and how they interact. It's called the triple bottom line of sustainability: social, environmental, economic systems and how they interact. And each year, because it's such a great concept, we have a CFC sustain solves theme. And over the 5 years of this project, the first year was on water issues. Year 2 was called fair distribution and social justice. Year 3, we looked at issues related to food security. And year 4, last year, we looked at issues related to climate change. And this year, we're bringing it all together with a theme of sustainable cities and communities. So this was our little image for this year, right? And the point is hopefully by the time you'll graduate from the College of Charleston, you see all of these are interconnected things that really relate together. And these are all related to 21st century problems that you're gonna have to solve with your degree. And so tonight, our 4 visionaries who've been working in this space of trying to make a better world socially, environmentally, economically, through the last years and years of their lives. So all great leaders in this space. And so starting then with Kennae, who just did that amazing grounding for us. Kennae goes by her and she, her. She's a change invoker, inner world instigator, and community builder that has been teaching multiple styles of yoga since 2015. She completed her initial yoga teacher training at Hawaii Yoga Institute on the island of Oahu, Hawaii, and her 300-hour teacher training with Skill in Action out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Kennae is currently training with Katie Silcox to complete her 300-hour Ayurvedic coaching certification and training under the wisdom of Marcia Nieranowski as an herbalist. She is the proud founder of Transformation Yoga, South Carolina's only Black veteran and woman-owned yoga studio, utilizing healing and transformative justice frameworks. Really helpful website. Just look up Transformation Yoga and that should come up. Transformation Yoga provides the tools of yoga and meditation to the essential lives of Black, Indigenous, and people of color that have been underserved, underrepresented, and marginalized from an anti-racism, anti-oppression, and trauma-informed framework. Straight up sustainability in action. So thank you for being here with us tonight. And then another, y'all don't realize how amazing our panelists tonight. Another heroine of mine is Germaine Jenkins. And if you have not been out to Fresh Future Farm, y'all owe yourself a trip to go out and donate some time and money to the amazing work Germaine's leading over there. Germaine, born in Hartsville, South Carolina, but grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. When Germaine was a 25-year-old single mom, she moved back to her native South Carolina to be closer to family and eventually finished her college education. After graduating with honors from Johnson & Wales University, Germaine focused on work that addressed her lived experience of inadequate food access. In 2014, Germaine co-founded Fresh Future Farm on a vacant city lot with limited resources. For the last 8 years, she has led a team that created abundance in this disinvested neighborhood. Jenkins has been featured in Food and Wine, New York Times, Essence Magazine, is now the subject of a full-length documentary describing Fresh Future Farm's work to build community wealth and creative placemaking. Germaine's movement allies include Urban Growers Collective Chicago, Cooperate Western North Carolina, at Old Port, North Carolina, Black Minimalists, League of Creative Interventionists, Equity at the Table, and Black Lives Matter at Greater New York. So again, Fresh Future Farm, really powerful website. You can learn more about there too and follow along on social media. Moving this way is Chef DJ Dennis. Born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina, personal chef and caterer Benjamin DJ Dennis infuses the flavors and culture of the Low Country into his Gullah Geechee cuisine, bringing a new taste to an ever-expanding culinary palette of the South. What differentiates Chef DJ's food from his contemporaries in Southern cooking is the homage he pays to the Gullah Geechee culture brought to the Americas by West Africans and disseminated along the West Indies in the American South. Dennis infuses the techniques of his ancestors, learned from 4 years of study at St. Thomas, as well as the lessons of his grandparents about eating from the land to create fresh interpretations of local dishes, focusing on in-season, locally sourced vegetables and seafood. He's cooked and learned in Trinidad and Tobago, Haiti, Barbados, Dominica, US Virgin Islands, Angola, Bahamas, and Benin, and has grafted all this into his cooking on top of Gullah Geechee stuff. So connecting the people cultures of the African diaspora through food, bringing back a true taste of Gullah Geechee culture. And then closest to me, who after I announce will start going back this way, is our fourth amazing panelist. And this is my good friend, Clayton Thomas-Muller, who I've known, gosh, since 2001, been at 5 years.
A long time.
Yeah, and this is his third time on campus. So Clay is a member of the Treaty 6 based Matthias Colomb Cree Nation, also known as Pukatawagan, located in northern Manitoba, Canada. Based in the Prairie City, Winnipeg, Clayton is the Stop It at the Source campaigner with 350.org, as well as a founder and organizer with Defenders of the Land. Clayton is involved in many initiatives to support the building of an inclusive movement globally for energy and climate justice. He serves on the boards of Black Mesa Water Coalition, the Global Justice Ecology Project, and Pioneers. He's also a steering committee member of the Tar Sands Solutions Network. And Clayton actually will have a book for sale by him after the talk. He was just a finalist for Canada Reads, one of 5 books selected by everybody in Canada should read. It's a memoir, Life in the City's Dirty Water, about his childhood growing up in Winnipeg as an Indigenous youth and how he transformed into a climate justice campaigner that's internationally recognized. So I'm going to pass the microphone now. Thank you for sitting through all that. And we're going to get 5 minutes overviews of the amazing work, and then you'll just start riffing together. Again, write down any questions you want to ask. And after that, we'll open it up to all those questions.
Cool. Hey. How y'all doing? Good. Bonjour, français. Sans plus bénéficier de je pense que nous programme. It's really amazing to be here. I don't know, it's like super abstract. You know, like I grew up in the prairies and you know, it's a different world than a coastal city like this place. But what I'll say though is that you know, whether you live where I am or whether you live here, there are some big changes that are happening right now in the world. You know? And I think ecologically speaking, you know, climate change is one of the biggest issues that we face in our time. And the impacts of that and the trauma and the like stress that it like puts on us, a lot of people aren't even aware of it. Like Todd and I were just talking about that, about how people today are going through life stressed out, you know, deciding not to have kids, because they don't want to bring kids into the world, you know, the way it is, and it's all like traumatic, you know, it's like harmful. So people are filled with fear, anxiety, and like there's this whole thing that's going on, and like y'all must feel that in a wild way because you live on the coast, you know. And I mean, there are literally websites that people in Charleston can go to see, you know, where your house is going to be underwater in like 20 years. That's scary, you know. So I want to acknowledge that. That said, you know, getting to this moment in time, you know, is a result of like an economic process, you know, capitalism. the big C, you know. And the reality of it is that people have invested in a process that, quite frankly, is going to not exist in 20 years. Capitalism, the ecological ceiling on this economic framework that the United States of America is invested in is not going to exist in 20 years. Back in the day when I was a young activist and going out there and swearing at leaders and decision makers and being like, F the system, I get really mad and yell at people and say, why don't you change things? And I didn't have a lot of impact on that. But what I did find impact from was talking to community leaders, like the people I'm sitting on the panel today, about what are the things that our communities are facing and how does climate change exacerbate all the things that we're facing. How is our liberation, our struggle tied together, you know? And what are we going to do collectively to advocate for our rights, for our human rights, for our right to live, for our right to exist. And climate change is one of those existential weird things that most people, quite frankly, don't know how to deal with. They think about climate change, they hear the word climate change, and they get shut down, right? And I think a big goal of people like myself, community, leaders across the globe, our whole deal is somebody's
Yeah, zooming in.
our whole deal is how do we organize the community support, expand our political base of resistance? How do we get involved in the discussion about climate mitigation and adaptation? How are we going to deal with this issue? And for my brown and black friends here in the audience, climate change makes being brown, black, indigenous even worse, because of environmental racism that exists in this country and in Canada where I come from. It is a grim reality that people of color, indigenous peoples, brown and black people, we face environmental injustices at a disproportionate rate compared to white folks in the United States. And it's just the reality of it, And so, for me, this work right now that I'm involved in, I work for a global climate organization, 350.org. And a lot of my work right now in Canada is focused on stopping the largest industrial construction project in the history of humankind. It's called the tar sands. It's the biggest oil and gas development on the planet. And it's so big and so devastating. You can literally see this from outer space, that ecological footprint. There are waste ponds, water. Sorry.
Yeah, I pulled up some pictures probably.
There are waste ponds that are so big you can see them from outer space. And indigenous communities that are in the midst of this massive development are impacted, in a way, in a human and indigenous rights and human health way that is just different than most folks. It's when you're native, you're living in the bush, in the way a lot of our people live. You are the land. The land is you. What happens to the land happens to you. And so when people be eating like country foods, like out of the like forests, out of the rivers, they get cancer. And the cancer spikes in a lot of these communities that are in this industrial development, the tar sands, are just wild, it's really crazy. I mean, we had a doctor, a medical professional, blow a whistle and say that Native people are dying from cancers as a result of the biological exposure that they're facing because of this fossil fuel development that's taking place in northern Alberta. So, for the last 20 years, I spent my life supporting communities that are fighting against multinational oil corporations and the federal government of Canada and the provincial government of Alberta for supporting this economic development, this form of profiteering. And, it's been really challenging because so many people, like I said, Native people, like myself, I'm a hunter and a fisher. I'm a hunter and a fisher person. I fish, I hunt, and my father before me did that, and my whole family, they live off the land. My family straight up lives in the bush, in the, up north, and they hunt moose, they fish, they get rabbits, they get all kinds of food-based lands, and all of that though is being threatened right now because where I live, where I come from, where I'm visiting from, is a country that is circumpolar. So when we talk about climate change, when we talk about the impacts of our fossil fuel dependent economy and the way that things just are, in Canada, that means like a lot worse circumstances. Like we're a circumpolar country, so even though the rest of planet Earth, when we think about climate change, is facing like a 2 to 3 degree change as far as temperatures, in Canada we're facing a 5 degree change. And so, thank you. So a lot of the work that we've been doing, is around like asserting our role, our identity as Indigenous peoples, the food that we create that comes from the land, our relationship with like the ecosystem, all of these things are a big part of the conversation we're having back home in terms of like, the value that exists in our communities, like our relationship with food, it's just as sacred as our relationship to our actual language, our culture. And so, when coming here and talking to you all, I would say that like this fight is the fight, but also the solutions to climate change are very much entrenched in culture, very much entrenched in like the way that we see the world, the place that the Creator put us, and our ancestors, have so much knowledge about how we're gonna like protect sacred places where we live. And I mean, y'all live in a coastal city or you go to school in a coastal city, and like the realities of sea level rises here in this area are pretty intense, And so, the need for continuing conversations about climate change, about human rights, about equity, justice, are more important than ever. And we've got to figure this stuff out because pretty soon, a lot of coastal people are going to end up living in the prairies where I come from, So yeah, you'll be welcome, but it'll be kind of intense. So I'll pass the mic.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? All right. I'm BJ. I'm born and raised here in Charleston. I'm a chef. Y'all probably wonder what a chef doing talking about environmental justice. I ask myself that same question. Like, how did I get into this world? I'm really not into this world, but some things kind of go hand in hand, because I'm a chef that supports our farmers. I'm also somebody who grew up here in Charleston, let me go back first. I went to college in Charleston, long time ago. Long time ago. 1 year only, stayed in College Lodge. College Lodge still has that reputation, but that was a fun time. And back then, though, the difference was the bars didn't close till 4 or 5 a.m. So I had 1 year at school. And that's how I became a chef, because I had to start working. My parents were very upset. But I've always also worked the land with my grandparents. I grew up across the bridge, West Ashley, near a place called Maryville. But my roots are, I don't know if y'all know where Daniel Island is at. My family graves on Daniel Island. Clemens Ferries with my family houses, and I used to go out with my grandfather. We had to work the fields, work the land, and talk to me a lot about working the land, living off the land, fishing, hunting, farming. So as I became a chef and as I grew my career, it just kind of worked hand in hand. And kind of one of the things I'm working on now is the fact that we are having issues with the rising sea level. And that's problematic with a lot of crops. Because a lot of people don't know, a lot of crops don't like salt water in the air. I mean, if you drive your car, if you live downtown Charleston long enough, you start to see the inside of your car start to rust. That's how much salt is in the air around here. So one of the things I'm working on with some other people is trying to figure out what crops will be salt tolerant, because that's a very important thing. But if the sea levels keep rising, are we going to be able to even farm on the coast? I mean, we're already dealing with displacement of our natural lands here as Gullah Geechee people. I don't know if anybody knows what Gullah Geechee culture is, but I'm a Gullah descendant. I mean, you go to the school, you look at a school that was built by Gullah people. I mean, that's facts, that's documented. That College of Charleston was built by enslaved Africans, Gullah Geechee people. So you see that, you see what's going on with gentrification, rising sea levels. I mean, you can go online and look up the Friends of Gaston Creek. That is an environmental justice project right now that's happening right around the corner where the Citadel is at. West Edge, that big, high, tall building over there, they're trying to fill in the creek so they can build more buildings. So when we keep filling in land downtown, is that going to help with the rising sea level? Our ancestors, and typically also the Native Americans, knew how to deal with this environment. But because of greed and capitalism, that's not going to happen now, because we want to build, we want to fill in, and the more we build in the city, the lower it gets, the more we'll have issues. So it's a problem that it's a battle, I would say, because capitalism is problematic. Capitalism can't be good if we use it in the right way. I don't even know if capitalism can really be good. Let me retract that. I don't think capitalism can be good, but you can use capitalism in a way to try to do better. And right now, we're not. You can walk around Charleston, you see it all day long. You realize most of the city used to have, like, you go down there, Market Street, if you go straight down Market Street, I don't know if y'all know what Fleet Man that restaurant, that used to be all waterfront. Like, where fishermen, other people would come off the sea islands, James Island, Jones Island, and bring fish into the city, vegetables into the city, because it was poor working class people in the colonial period during enslavement and after slavery, after emancipation. They were the ones who fed the city, poor working class people. Because you gotta realize there were no grocery stores back then, so everyone had to buy vegetables fresh every day. And it was the poor working class Gullah Geechee folks who were the ones providing the vegetables. But when you lose that landscape and you become modernized, and you forget, so if you can't grow your vegetables, we can't feed our communities, we're gonna lose. We're always dependent on grocery stores. One day that grocery store concept is not gonna work. You're gonna have to be able to fend for yourself. But if you don't have the land or the knowledge to do that, what do you want to do? So it's a battle, and I know as a chef that I will be in this position, but I'm a chef that supports our local farmers of all backgrounds because they are the backbone of our community. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't think I'm on the level of my friends on this panel right here. I'm just a chef that loves to support our community and try to figure out how we want to sustain this in the next 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years. Pastor Germaine.
Hey, everybody, I'm gonna scratch BJ's last sentence because, when nobody kind of believed in what it is that we were doing at Fresh Future Farm, BJ was one of the first people out there who were wood chips to help us like build, what is now, like, in a couple of months, it'll be a tropical space. And it's just interesting how our stories would be interwoven because I moved back to South Carolina and then to Charleston to go to Johnson & Wales University. That's where the cigar factory is now. And after graduating, I couldn't afford to follow my degree, which was a baking and pastry degree in food service management, because bakers got to be in the shop at 4 o'clock in the morning when I had my kids, so that was at work. But I ended up getting a job cooking for children, my children and other kids that didn't have, the same access that I wanted for my children to food. So I was just cooking for a bunch of kids. It ended up, after doing that in Maryville, at a garden, they have a community garden in Maryville that I ended up preparing some potato salad with the kids. And long story short, it was the engagement with children that got me into gardening. From cooking to gardening, and then my interest in having the same quality foods that you can get when you go to a restaurant available to people in communities. Because as BJ was saying, we have been so displaced from land, we don't remember like what got us here. And I lived in the public housing right over there between Sanders Pie and the cigar factory. And I had come from a job where I could feed my children when I wanted to, and then I did not like the fact that someone else dictated what was on our plate. And 9 times out of 10, what was served to us was not going to have the most nutritional benefit. So we're seeing all these rates of high blood pressure, diabetes, etc., because we don't have that same connection to the land that our ancestors did. So how do we take what was learned then to do something different? And I went to master gardening class because I ended up, working for the Low Country Food Bank where they saw kids would eat whatever I put on the plate, but because there was some trust. They told me early, my gourmet food was nasty, and I took that feedback and made something that looked more like what folks are used to eating, like cayenne vegetables and spaghetti sauce. Let's count how many vegetables I did in spaghetti sauce. You won't, know what it is, but it made it a fun activity. So ended up getting a job doing nutrition work in the food bank, and I was going this year like, you don't have to stand in line at the pantry. So that led me to going to training with Will Allen, is somebody who taught me in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and going to meet him first in North Branch, Minnesota, with some indigenous folks, and having the same kind of frustrations with the chef that I met there, who watched his community decline over commodity boxes. And that's the same thing that we're distributing at food banks to folks. And I would have been in trouble a lot of times in the food bank because if somebody called me to say that they didn't have access to groceries and vegetables, I was going to have it in my car and take it to them. Because to me, that's what we were supposed to be in the business of doing. And if the communities didn't have resources yet to make it available, how do we do that? And I just think about what Clayton was saying about cancer, stress, and then that to me is a connection to violence. Because, I'm meeting people in the Shakur Cherokee neighborhood, younger than me, I'm 51, who have cancer when they're 30 years old because of all the environmental, upside that these low wealth communities become. And that we can kind of dig into culture to reverse that. And what we're doing at Fresh Future Farm is we took 0.8 acres of property that North Charleston, city of North Charleston got in a trade with Charleston County School District, and turned it into something that looks a lot more like what our indigenous cultures live with than what we see now. So folks that live in that neighborhood can come and get the freshest, most nutrient dense, fruit, vegetables. We're sourcing from Black chefs, other Black farmers to make this available. We just had somebody call us today to say who told us, because there was a trust and dignity. Like, we don't believe that we are the only people that have the answers to problems. But just talking to a customer who was diagnosed with pre-diabetes, I said, I know what you like to eat. Let's just change it a little bit. And just went back today and it's had a clean bill of health. So I'm gonna rest on that. I'll take care of it.
Hi, everybody. Man, I have to fall off. So how does yoga align in any of this? It's all interconnected. I am a yoga teacher by trade, but pre-yoga teacher, I'm a warrior. And what I find super important about warriors is the best healers are warriors, and they know both sides of it. All of it is in there somewhere. And the way that you choose to fight and be a warrior depends on how you decide to be a warrior. You can be protesting, or you can also be a part of the change instrumentally. I know we're talking about sustainability, but I'm here not to sustain what's already present. I don't want to sustain it. I want to create something that's new. And I want to encourage other people to be a part of envisioning and creating what's new, what's different, so that everybody has what they need as we move forward. One of the things I wanted to point out from the other shares that I heard is really that, we need to take action. In yoga and wellness, pre-COVID numbers, yoga and wellness, there are 23.6 billion people that practice yoga. It's a $9 billion industry. So imagine if 23.6 billion people in this country that believe that they're doing good and living right and green juices actually got involved in politics. You guys are pretty quiet. But imagine that many people actually realize that the political is very personal. Every decision that we make, whether we spend our dollars with Lululemon or locally, right? All of that impacts all of us. And it's really important that we get beyond just the sticker that says buy local, and we actually are involved in the local. Yogis, wellness folks have a tendency to believe that because they're well, they're doing their part, but you're not. If your self-care only includes you, that's not self-care, you're participating in capitalism. It's been co-opted and repackaged. Another part of even that is a lot of the practices that we do believe are wellness and yoga and spiritual have been stolen and colonized from other cultures and then packaged, rebranded, and handed back to us, so that the leaders and the experts do not look like brown and Black people, which the culture was stolen from. So I just want to acknowledge that as well, that when we're practicing and we're uplifting yoga and wellness spaces, we look and see who are those teachers that we're listening to. It's very easy to get on our yoga mats and say all is well and spiritually bypass what's actually happening. But if you have to keep putting on rain boots to walk over to the yoga studio, that's you're gonna be swimming, it'll be a triathlon, right? So we have to do something, and we have to get involved beyond our yoga mats. And that's where, even if you read the spiritual text or sacred text in yoga, Bhagavad Gita, it tells us that yoga, it requires us to take action. We can't just do a nice pose and wear the pants and drink the green juice when we're walking next to people that are houseless, when we know that there are people that can't even afford a yoga class because they don't even know where their next meal is coming from. And so I'm here to invoke change, and I'm inviting you to be a part of that, right? To see beyond yourself and help envision the world that we're looking forward to.
Did y'all just rip together for
I
a bit?
think we're going to Q&A.
Unless you want to respond to each other, we can open for question and answer.
Yeah, well, I just wanna say like how much I like raise my hands up for my sister when she's talking about, I can't express enough to y'all, and like it might come off as like unbelievable. But we're fucked. Like seriously. Like this city is underwater in 20 years. Straight up. Most coastal cities across the planet underwater, 20 years. So it's hard to wrap your mind around that, like to think about New York underwater, like you're like, huh? What? You know, they're talking about what were you saying, Todd, a $3 trillion.
Yeah, Miami, the Dutch dialogues accept 6 feet of sea level for Charleston by 2100.
You know, we're all on the hook for massive tax expenditures on infrastructure to deal with the climate crisis. And we put the lens of gender, in the lens of race, and the lens of class onto that complex challenge that we're collectively facing. It's a pretty scary thing, especially for us brown and black people, especially for brown and black women. They're mine, right? I'm sorry, I'm trying to speak for y'all, but you know what I mean? And so we've got like this crazy collective responsibility in a very short window to deal with this threat, you know, and it's very much a threat. But what I'll say though is that there are those of us that are straight up fucking lawyers, and we're not gonna stop. We will organize, we will educate, we will spend the time that we're doing right now with community and like educate, share information. And we need your help, we need you to get involved. You know, like, especially in the United States, like I'm from Canada, like, there's more people that live in California than the entire country that I come from, okay? And, you know, it's super challenging there as a native, like, activist organizer, because, you know, 80% of our population is white or European step or presented. They can pass as a white person, you know, which is like a super advantageous thing, right? You might not know that if you're white, but like for brown and black people, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's called white privilege. And so in Canada, where I come from, it's really big challenge, like to deal with that systemic racism, to deal with internalized racism, to deal with interpersonal racism. And you know, and then when you apply that lens to how we build our economy and our strategies into the future, you know, our economic development, and we don't like take race and, you know, like level the playing field, so to speak, it creates a lot of injustice, you know, and a lot of us, like you know, like I guarantee you, in the next 10 years, when sea levels rise and shit goes really crazy here in Charleston, it's going to be brown and black people that are going to be impacted first and foremost and most harsh. They don't have the insulation, they don't have the infrastructure. And you'll see the racial divisions that exist in the discourse about climate change. And so, you know, coming down here, hanging out with these like amazing human beings, I'm here to send a message that, like, look, you're from Northern Canada, you're from Charleston, South Carolina, like, we gotta work together and like build infrastructure to deal with the realities of climate science, okay? And our world is going to dramatically change in the next 10 years, and it's going to create all kinds of inequity. So there's a good way to deal with climate change, and there's a totally effed up way to deal with it. And what I'm here like selling y'all is snake oil, but not snake oil, is that we gotta think about climate change from a justice perspective. Because y'all, you know what caused climate change? Colonialism. Slavery. You know, this like crazy fucked up way of thinking and existing and consuming and capitalism. Capitalism, right? 150 years the United States and Canada have existed, and our ecology is collapsing. Our economy is based on our stability of our ecology. We've hit the glass ceiling. Not me. Can't speak for brown and black people, but I certainly can't speak for white folks. But you know, there's a whole discourse and narrative that's wound up in this conversation about climate change. How are we going to react to it, mitigate and adapt to the realities of it? How are we going to kill in science? And how are we going to build the biggest social movement in the history of humankind to deal with this issue? You know, and you know, here in the US, especially in this city, Charleston, you know, I said this before when he came back here, you know, like Charleston is like the hotbed of racism and white privilege. You know, that's where the Tea Party comes from. Don't tread on my, you know, whatever. Yeah, you know, it's like super racist here. So, you know, y'all got some big things to like overcome, but y'all have support and help and guidance if you ask for it. Okay?
You touched on something you talked about, it's been happening since enslavement. I don't know if y'all ever drew or y'all know what Buford, anybody know what Buford is? So you think it's probably, I think it's the most prettiest scenic drive in the country. 1721. I actually live outside of Buford right now. I live out there for like a year. But there's an area called the East Basin. We know about the history of the Low Country. If you study history, you know about rice culture. Rice is what made this city the richest in the country. When you go to the East Basin, you're going through an area where the enslaved had to go into these rivers and creeks and hand pull cypress trees. You know how big a cypress tree is? And build. Now, on one hand, the intellectual mindset of the enslaved African was able to build all these intricate dikes and dams and these rivers, but at the same time, because this was being weaponized against them, their knowledge, the rice culture was being weaponized against them to build this grand area, which some people say is the largest man-made area that you can see from outer space. Not the Great Pyramids, not the Great Wall of China, it's the East Basin. And that was by the enslaved people. But at the same time, that was the start of environmental problems. Because you basically wiping out the landscape to build these intricate dikes and dams for rice. And the enslaved didn't get any bit of that money. And they didn't know that they were messing up that environment. And the Native Americans from that community were already wiped out. So this is something that's been going on knowingly or unknowingly because of capitalism. I mean, one of the things that you can see also our coastline, the Native Americans used to do this thing called oyster, I'm saying the last word probably wrong, dividends. So the Native Americans, oysters for the coastal Native Americans was the #1 protein that they ate. And oysters back then were huge. They would build mounds of oysters on the coast. I don't know if y'all ever have any friends who have houses on the coastal area. You see the shell mounds, or you see people throw their oyster shells. It helps with the water, the tides coming. It helps kind of slow down the flooding. So this is something that the Native Americans did for thousands of years. Piles of oyster shells to help with the coastline and to also know when they're coming back from their boats where they're coming to. All that was destroyed because of colonialism. So environmental injustice has been going on for so long. And the root of that is capitalism. I mean, you walk around Charleston and it's a living, Charleston's a walking plantation. I mean, you can't put that, it is, it's everywhere you go. I mean, some of the old houses on this campus right here is, you would just won't believe some of the things that happen in these places. This is a walking plantation, no matter where you go in this city. Lots of trauma. And when you grow up here, you know, you see it, you live it, but you deal with it. It's almost like you're dealing with something that becomes normalized to you, right? And so these traumas also affect us with our everyday life. So all this kind of ties in together. So you can imagine living in an area that's been beat down, you know, to build all these houses, you know, waterfront properties gone. And when you take away waterfront property, you take away livelihoods of people, fish, farming, all these things. And it's I don't know, it's a battle. All we can do as a collective, as human beings, because that's what we all are, human beings, is to work together to figure out the betterment of everybody. Because yes, it's going to affect brown and black people first, but it ends up affecting everybody. So then what do we do then? That's when we realize that one people, they need to figure out how to save this earth as a collective.
And in my opinion, the way that we figure this out as a collective is look at our history and how we fed ourselves, how we lived in cooperatively. You know, there would be 16 million acres of land that, you know, black, formerly enslaved people held if it wasn't for collective courage. And that's the name of the book, Jessica Empire, if you want to read about cooperative living. And we need to go back to that, dismantling a lot of this infrastructure that's causing us harm. And that's what, you know, we are kind of like doing at a faster pace at Fresh Acre Farm. And, you know, one of the questions that Todd gave for us was around leadership. And, you know, capitalism loves to isolate or pinpoint one person as a leader or a visionary. Like what I'm talking about, what we're talking about is the vision of other people. Like bringing that back, you know, thinking about like Fannie Lou Hamer, thinking about Shirley Sherrod and the folks that came before them that had a solution that were intentionally destroyed. You know, I remember hearing Shirley Sherrod say that she never thought that somebody would fight her desire to be self-sufficient, but it's happened. It's happening. And you know, what looked like colonialism has just taken on a more higher advanced, like technological form of the way that neighborhoods are gentrified. Yeah, we just reimagined it. But somehow or another, you know, like social services look exactly like they did 50 years ago. Like, what's that about? So I think a lot of this, you know, the things that we're fighting against happen by design, and we have to be intentional and persistent as a collective. And if you know, BJ like mentioned, like looking for answers, I would suggest you look for them in a book. People have already like or books. People have already talked about this, and if you want to engage somebody, be open to opening up your pocketbook, because there's a wealth of knowledge that's built over decades at this table. So lots of people want to take you for a cup of coffee. That's gonna be the most expensive cup of coffee you're paying for. Thanks.
And I would share, until I want for my brother or my sister what I want for me, we're not gonna be free. And that's black, that's brown, that's indigenous, that's white, presenting or white body. Because this is about all of us. And I know we've said capitalism a couple times, and that does sometimes sound like a scary word, but there are ways to create economies that look different, that sustain all of us. Capitalism thrives off of us believing that we're not enough, and that there's scarcity. That you have to have an overabundance of everything. One of the, I think, prime examples of this was the beginning of the pandemic. We knew it was coming, we knew it happened, and people started ordering toilet paper, peanut butter, the hand sanitizer, all of the things. And then some communities, you know, when people that didn't have excessive income were able to say, hey, well, there's no toilet paper left, I need something. Other communities was taking care of each other. Like Fresh Acre Farm was taking care of their neighbors, delivering food, delivering toiletries, making sure folks had masks. And it was the beginning of re-witnessing us caring for each other collectively, not about it being profits, but about us taking care of each other. And so I say all of that to say that, like BJ said, you know, capitalism exists. And we're not telling us, you know, we're not gonna dismantle it overnight. But at the same time, we can't use capitalism for good. And in the ways that Germaine shared about gentrification and enslavement happening and looking differently, I'm gonna call it out right now, regardless, that's the nonprofit industrial complex right now, where everyone has hired these experts outside of communities that want to say, well, I know what's best for the community, why don't we just do this, and why don't the people do that? And they have no relationship to the people in the community, they have no understanding of the history of that community. They have no understanding of how the people have continued to show up for each other over and over again to do this work and to support each other. And we're not talking about the nonprofits where they just put black and brown faces in front. Meanwhile, someone else is running the puppet strings. We're really talking about grass-led organizations that are actually listening to the culture of the people in the community and want to do right, that allow the community to share in collective power and lead us to what we need next. And I think that's the same thing with climate change. We don't have all the answers. There are so many transplants here. I mean, we're like at 50 people a day moving here in Charleston. Yes, we know taxes are high in New York. You can stay there though. Like, we're closing the doors, we're closing. But at the same time, we need that support, you know, coming down from what some people believe is a more liberal and progressive state. We need them to take action politically. We need them to also get involved in what is happening locally. We need folks to care about the coast, care about the farmers, care about what we all have access to, or again, the coast isn't gonna exist and we're all gonna be hurting pretty bad here. So I just wanna say that again one more time. That until we want for each other what we want for ourselves, none of us are gonna be free. Our liberation is bound in each other. And that doesn't mean that makes us the experts, but each one of us embodies some wisdom that we can collectively share to weave a beautiful thread and tapestry on how we're gonna get where we're going, or attempting to get where we're going.
Truth. Fantastic. So, thank you all for sharing all of that. And so we'll open it up now to the floor. Challenges, agreements, questions. Again, we have 4 frontline workers doing amazing work. For those of you who are college age at CFC, this is experience talking about, hey, this is what we're going to need to navigate a very different, tough future. And real quick, just some data points. So those of you who don't know, the city just paid, Todd, you might know the amount of numbers, a lot of money to bring some engineers over from the Netherlands. Because they have dealt with sea level rise, they have these dike systems. So we brought some engineers here and say, okay, what can you teach us that we're going to have to do coming our way? And basically, the starting point of their discussion was the acceptance of the best consensus science that Charleston will have 6 feet of sea level rise locked in no matter what we do today moving forward by 2100. We talked to Norm Levine up in Geology 1 floor above us. He says by 2070. So when Clayton is saying, you know, it's 20 years away, like there's going to be a couple more feet here in 20 years, right? And then all of the disproportionate impacts. So that's like the starting point of where we need to be now as a community. And that's what they're sharing with us, with their wisdom and their work in this space. Trying to push this boulder up in Charleston, which is not a city that wants to heal, right? All of you know this enough to know, right? And that can't continue. So we got to come together. So thank you all for sharing that, creating a space, right? And Clayton sees this in his own community. If you saw the tar sands pictures, y'all, that's crazy stuff. We're sucking up the bottom of the barrel to keep this going, and it can't go anymore. So that's what he's been campaigning against in his community, saying, look, it's the same fight.
Yeah.
And the solutions are the same solution, it's us coming together with new ways of being together as humans. Okay, so that's my little rip, just to bring that together. Hands up, am I walking microphone, or you can just speak loudly. Do you want the mic, or you just want to go from there?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, cool.
Hi, panelists. My name is Kennae. I'm a freshman here at the Honors College. It was such a blessing, and I really appreciate hearing all of your thoughts on, everything that Charleston and South Carolina and Canada and everything that we're experiencing. So I guess my thoughts after this, we heard a lot from you about the different problems that Charleston is facing, which are very, very great. But where do you find your hope going forward?
Yes.
It can, as a young person, in college, like freshman year, coming to Charleston, seeing the sea level rise and the flooding, that's a big issue, and it's kind of hard, seeing that and hearing that, this is locked in our future. So, where do you find your hope to kind of keep going and knowing that you're making an impact?
You start? Sure. Cool. Good question, thank you.
For me, the hope started in our backyard, where, actually I lived in public housing over here, and told my kids when they were very little, we're gonna leave this place, move into a house, and the house is gonna have a garden, and that we did it, and it turned into a homestead, and just the act of getting into soil kind of grounded us in so many different ways that, now we're able to do this work and model how important and how not complicated it is, so that other folks are thinking about farming. And then we're collecting like on a national level with other people doing kind of the same kind of work, so that there are more people giving back to the land versus, like going industrial. So that's hope for me.
In the moment, I find hope in the younger generation. Y'all got mouths, boy. Y'all like to say a whole lot of stuff. Whether you're right or wrong is another subject, but you guys are growing up with this brave capacity to say the things and do the things, to challenge things that don't make sense. For a lot of older generations, we're taught to kind of shut up the color and be like, I don't want color. Whatever, I want to do this. So I find hope in hearing young people that want to shift, young people that do show up in spaces like this to listen, young folks that do still show up and listen to elders and have questions. I don't have questions, and I have answers. Every time I meet someone, I'm like, what can you teach me? What do you know that I don't know? What wisdom can I gain from you? Because that's what's going to carry us forward. There's this belief, Sankofa, that you look back so you can go forward. And I think that that's the practice of what's happening. A lot of young people are realizing, we have the energy to move forward, but let's go back to the books, let's go back to Fannie Hammer, let's go back to all the people who have done this work before us, and let's see what they did and how we can move those things forward. So that's how I'm finding hope right now, and realizing that I'm neither too old nor too young to not do anything. I can stuff the envelope, I can talk to somebody, I can use my thumbs on social media if needed, I can invite someone over and have a conversation. But more than anything, I can impact other people by even asking questions that cause them to invoke. I think the ultimate thing, yes, like I said, I'm a yoga teacher, but my ultimate weapon as a warrior is to be a mic dropper. I like to ask a question and drop the mic so that people have to sit with it like, dang, what did that mean? How did that land for me? And really see how that changed and goes from that point. So I'll give you a question. And I'll leave the question for everyone in the room actually. If you can think of the origins of one item that you're wearing tonight, that's a good start in your involvement with environmental justice and sustainability.
How do I keep going? I guess for me is I'm still here, I'm alive. For me also is to know that I'm a descendant of a survivor. We all descendants of some type of survivors, right? But for me, knowing that like people were enslaved, and not only that, they survived sometimes a month walk from the interior of Africa to the coast, then a couple of months in a dungeon, then a couple of months on a boat, then to come to a plantation and survive. Sometimes they were walked from Colorado, South Carolina, all the way to James Island. I'm a cloud plantation, that's my buddy right there, he tells that story all the time, that's facts. So I'm a survivor, because my ancestors survived because they were thinking about me. My grandfather tells me the story when he was alive, we were always talking about, his grandfather bought 22 acres on Clemens Ferry Road, which is right by Dang Valley. And he was his grandfather telling him that I didn't buy this property for you, I bought it for your grandkids. So they survived and did things for us. So rising sea levels, we can figure this out. I mean, I'm inspired, I keep being motivated by seeing y'all in the faces in this room, knowing that at the end of the day, there's a lot of us out here who want to win, who want to see the betterment of the human race. So for me, that's my motivation. My motivation also is like-minded folks coming together to figure it out. You know, figuring out how to be sustainable on the land, how to get food back into our communities that tastes right, that tastes good, how to make sure that the soil, which is another issue, that our soil is in a good place, that our soil has nutrients. Because something is grown and is organic doesn't mean nothing if that soil isn't healthy. That's another issue that we don't talk about in this country, the quality of our soil, because most of the wheat that we eat around here is ag. And you know who runs these wheat farms? Big ag. And you know who's in the pockets of big ag? Politicians. So we all have a battle to face and to confront, and I keep going because I have no choice. I'm gonna be here on this earth and be here doing what I'm doing. I want to make sure that I represent my culture and my people, because I have to survive I can't think about me. I can't think about my 11-month-old son. I gotta think about his kids and their kids. I gotta think 4 or 5 generations down the road. And the sea level keep rising, the soil keeps going bad. My future generation not gonna have a good life. Like you said, people don't want to have kids no more because they're scared. But we can't be scared. We can't be scared. I know where my ancestors came from and they survived. There's a saying that we say that I am my ancestors' wildest street. And that's just the truth.
Yeah, I really feel, the perspectives of my fellow panelists here. At the end of the day, we're all selling hope. It's a pretty wild place right now on Mother Earth. There's a lot of injustice, there's a lot of suffering. And it's already really intense, especially for brown and black people, but it's gonna get even way more intense in the next 10 years. And you're gonna see it, like, especially really young people in the audience, like, I'm making eye contact with some of you. Like, you're living in a world that has never existed. We've literally changed the chemistry of the planet. And that impacts our ability to live and exist and survive on the planet. And it also affects a bunch of our relatives, like animals and plants, medicines we depend on. So, we gotta really, like, you kind of like, I hate to see it this way, but you kind of make it fight ahead of you. Like, things are gonna get really crazy. And in conveying that information to you all, I feel a responsibility to make eye contact with you, to let you know how serious this is. Okay? And in your lifetime, the world is going to change rapidly. And that change is going to impact people that are categorized and compartmentalized in systems of oppression, so racialized communities, brown and black, indigenous communities are going to suffer most. Communities in global south already are suffering because of violent, unpredictable climate change related events. And those events are going to continue to multiply and concentrate and exist and like happen, become normal. And so, you know, the big challenge that you all have is not to get like shut down by this like trauma, this like craziness, like to be activated, to like do something, you know, freaking get involved in fight. You know. But what I'm here, the main message I want to like share with my panelists here today is the fight for climate justice, the fight to save ourselves as human beings, is rooted in the fight against, you know, racism. It's rooted in, you know, that we've got to really unpack a lot of things as human beings, you know, especially white folks. You know, we got a lot of work to do, and at the same time that we're like doing that work, we also have to save our ability to live on Mother Earth, because you literally change the chemistry of the planet. So it's messed up. Like you know, I don't take it lightly when I talk to young people, students like yourselves. I'm feel a little older, but it's super intense. You know, like Todd and I were talking about the fact that like people are deciding to not have kids now. And that's climate trauma. Trauma related to the fact that the world is ending in our perspective. So, you know.
So Clay, what gives you hope in that?
What gives me hope in that though is that like I actually had a couple of kids. And you know what? You know, they're the most like wild ass, like radical young warriors. And they're like growing up in this moment that I can't even comprehend. And they're like, oh yeah, well then we'll fix that. And then we'll also make it hip hop. You know, like they're like really fashionable and like amazing and fearless, you know. These little warriors of this time. So, you know, my message to all of you is that, you know, it's important to take this issue of climate change, you know, to make it personal, because right now it's this existential kind of thing for many people, especially white folks. They're like, oh yeah, that's not me. But it's real and it's coming. And for a lot of like communities of color, indigenous communities, it's here already. You know, we don't have the wealth, the cash, like wealth, like, you know, like create barriers. But you know, it's here already. So, you know, my suggestion to everybody is that we spend time together where we are tonight, and just talk, and like make strategies to like protect our communities, like protect our sacred food and our connection to the sacredness of Mother Earth. And that's very much a regional specific thing. So these conversations have to happen everywhere.
Yeah, thank you. You want the mic or you just want to speak up? So it's here and then Sean, you'll be next. Are you comfy?
Germaine wants to say something.
Oh, sorry, Germaine, sorry, go for it.
Well, just as insurmountable as climate change can be, just think about one thing that you can do. And for, I think each of us is where our passions lie. That's, you know, where we like kind of did all our research to dig into history to like move forward in such a way that we can imagine a future. And you know, talking about kind of decentralizing leadership and young people, you know, the average age, I'm 51, but the average age of our team is like 27. And by the end of the year, I will stop being a director and we'll have co-directors in their 20s who will take this on and do things I can't even imagine today, so.
I'll try to be quick about this. Be a big question. So in Charleston right now, one of the strategies that we decided to come up with was a 8-mile sea wall. that the mayor of Charleston decided to file a lawsuit for the big oil company funds for it. And this is a really interesting, really heated topic because we are trying to come up with a solution that's not sustainable. It's coming from white wealth to sustain white wealth. And it's not really going to help Charleston in the long run. And not only that, this is going to put a seawall around the peninsula that probably won't be environmentally helpful for any of our barrier islands. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this, because it seems inevitable that this lawsuit comes to fruition, and either we get the money for the seawall and it continues, or it doesn't, and inevitably the water rises. And maybe white people, these POC communities are pushed back into Charleston after they were forced out, and they're left to deal with this mess because white people have to leave or to stay. And I was wondering what your thoughts are about it. I feel like it's a very difficult issue to kind of, especially when we're thinking strategies. Like this one has power, unfortunately, and it's kind of.
Yeah, everybody's able to hear that?
Yeah, so as Charleston, I mean, in a nutshell, a very complex city that doesn't want to take accountability of what is done. So your question is it's a great question. And it's an answer that, for me personally, all I can do is continue to play my role in what I'm doing. You do make a great point. I mean, I grew up here. I mean, this neighborhood, Oak Street, I don't know if y'all know, all y'all should go to the Avery Institute, the Avery Center. Oak Street, I mean, why would you think that a Black institution would be on that street? Because that neighborhood used to be Black folks. Just neighborhoods around here used to be Black folks. So you make a great point. They've been pushed out, and if things get terrible, well, people can leave who have the capital to leave, and we'll bring the Black folks back into the city now to deal with this mess. But we've been dealing with this mess for hundreds and hundreds of years now. So I think the answer I have is what we're all saying, that we have to get together as a collective. African Americans are only 13% of the population in the whole country. Our voice, I don't care how much political power we think we can get, I don't care who goes into the Supreme Court seat. That's all glitz and glamour over the real issue. We don't have the numbers to fight the whole battle. We need people to realize that we have to do this as a collective. We really do. So that's the only answer I have, that because we go back to what we're saying, that's fighting capitalism. That's white wealth fighting other white wealth to figure out an issue that's going to end up being thrown back into the faces of the LGBT people in this community. So it's complex, but that's in the history of not just only the city, but this country, very complex. So we have to be a collective to fight these battles.
A collective to fight battles, but also when we elect politicians, hold them accountable to do what they said they were going to do when they were elected. But I've lived long enough to know and seen enough history to know that the solutions to our issues are not necessarily coming like from politicians. And whatever the solutions that we're looking for have to come from within the communities. Like figure out what makes your space more livable, despite whatever somebody else is doing. Because especially if you're low wealth or underrepresented or ignored, you're going to be the last person to benefit, if at all, from whatever solution comes up. So look for a way that you can do something where you are with what you have.
I was gonna echo that and just say that the IPCC
Yeah,
said that colonization has been the biggest part of climate change.
yeah, straight.
And colonization is looks different now. It's northerners, it's southerners that flew north. They got all their wealth and is now coming back. And again, it's just gonna continue to displace Black and brown people that are gonna end up left trying to figure out how to fix things and how to pull it together. When if we could actually look at the historian, we could actually look to those people now for their wisdom. What did you guys do before? Unfortunately, so many of our indigenous brothers and sisters have been erased, have experienced genocide. They already had natural things that they did to be in harmony with the ecosystem here. The reefs, in addition to across the country, what's happening in California, they have controlled burns. And somehow colonization's like, nah, we don't think that works out right. And now what are we doing across the country? And I think that's where it's really important that we do pay attention to the history that we're telling, and we make sure that we're telling the truth in that history. And we also begin to, whiteness begins to reconcile that they're not the experts, and that they need other people as well. Capitalism thrives off of us believing that we're individuals and that we're not interconnected. And if I can attend a yoga class and feel good about myself, and I can act like I don't see the other person as suffering. But if I see your suffering, then I have to see my suffering. If I want folks to have compassion for me, then I have to have compassion for others. And I have to understand that although capitalism is pretending to fix it by putting a Band-Aid and building a wall that we know is not sustainable, we have to look ahead of even that. One of my mentors is Ruby Neal Sells that marched across the bridge on Bloody Sunday. And she says you have to have insight, foresight, and hindsight. And that's what we need to do to move forward and work collectively with each other, regardless of what they're doing. And I just want to throw out there too, I said earlier that the personal is political. We can always say, it's politicians, and it is politicians, but we elect those politicians, and those politicians are us. And unfortunately, so many of our politicians are older bodied people in this moment that are used to the status quo, they're used to avoiding those things. So we need more young people also to get into politics and say, we don't want to do this way anymore. We don't want our country to be built this way as we move forward, so.
I want to respect Thomas, we'll do one more with Sean, but just so you know, Clayton's memoirs for sale as you leave. So if you want to get a copy, if I can sign it, he's more than welcome to. It's about his life leading up to being one of the leading climate activists from Canada for Indigenous people. And then hang out, introduce yourselves to our panelists, and just talk a little shop on your way out. But for our last question, Sean, you still proclaiming up there? You got it?
No, I got it.
You want the mic? You're gonna.
Yeah, I can pass it.
Oh, you're gonna let somebody else get the last question then?
No, I don't need the mic.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear. Okay, cool, go for it.
So it seems like you guys think that capitalism is not compatible with sustainability and its leaders. So what economic system would you recommend is the most compatible with capitalism now? Or not, sorry, with climate change and environmental justice, and what steps are you guys taking in your personal lives to make this economic system come to fruition?
Nice loaded question. I like that though.
Sure, that line you told us about the solar panels get shipped. Remember that?
What's up?
Solar panels get shipped from China. Remember that line?
Yeah, so, I mean, at the end of the day, like, there isn't, I don't have an answer to your question. Like, as far as like, what do I say, socialism? Communism? Like, as far as these big political and economic like systems that like, are debated in academic institutions, like, I don't know. What I do know is that the solution to climate change is localizing power in the interest of globalizing justice. Okay? So like, when we look at energy and our consumption of energy and the way we store energy, like battery storage, this has got to be a real big factor of our mobility moving forward. But if we give the keys to Shell or Walmart, or Elon Musk even, you know, they're gonna like create the same problems that we as brown, black, people from the global south, indigenous face in the current fossil fuel dependent economy, in the renewable energy economy. There'll be shitty land use planning, they'll build wind farms like in the most sacred sites of like native people, like they're gonna do a shitty job if we give them the keys to the new economy. These assholes like destroyed our economy, they destroyed our ecology, fuck them, you know, straight up. And we need to develop local, bioregionally planned and designed economies that are like dependent on our ecology, you know, and that reinforce our role as human beings in that ecology as stewards, as protectors, you know. I mean, like, basically, like, the answer to your question is like, yeah, everybody just needs to start being native. You know what I mean? Like, native people have been like talking about this shit for like 200 years. And we say the same shit over and over. Like, I'm literally that native guy from the 70s with the tear rolling down my cheek in front of y'all right now. Like, I'm the same meme, you know, because we've been saying this shit forever. We've got to take care of the planet. What happens to the planet happens to us. There's no delineation, like, you know. So, you know, and I think woven throughout that though is a dismantling of the things that created the economic framework we live in, specifically patriarchy, white patriarchy. You gotta deal with that shit. Like these systems of oppression, racism, white supremacy, and these are all things that are like deeply ingrained, especially in the US body of politics, economics, and like social systems. We gotta fucking like tear that shit down, because that shit is like ending our ability as human beings to live on the planet. White men, sorry to any white men in the audience. But
No
yeah.
offense taken.
Thank you.
You're right.
I looked up the definition for that, or an idea around cooperative economics before I came here. The Heal Food Alliance is an organization that you can follow on and learn from on social media. But they were talking about cooperative economics being a combination of community empowerment and economic independence. So like what we're trying to do, especially the farm, is being intentional about creating networks, you know, with other Black farmers, like sharing land stewardship, environmentally friendly ways to grow, like intentionally without water, because it's a finite resource. And then like working collectively to create a food system that we lead where, like if you're growing collard greens and I'm growing some other kind of green, we can all aggregate our crops and can our own stuff that we then sell like within the community and distribute to folks that don't have resources to buy it.
Yeah, Matt, I'm in the same realm. Cooperative economics, trade and bartering. You know, it's complex because we built a system that is a juggernaut now through capitalism. So you gotta dismantle that. You gotta change the mind state of people, and that's hard to do because we've been programmed to be a certain way. But cooperative economics. I mean, if you think about it, you've given somebody a $5 bill, a $100 bill. What is that? Piece of paper. That's a mind state, right? An illusion of reality. So if we have cooperatives, so if you got a doctor, right, who is a brain surgeon, you might put him on a bigger pedestal, that's why he gets a lot of money. But if you don't have somebody to feed him, a partner to feed him, or somebody to cook for him, you don't have somebody to do these things, is he gonna be able to do it, or she gonna be able to do their job good? So it's a mindset that has to be changed. I think cooperative economics, trade and bartering is the way to go. And I don't think humans are perfect in human existence. But I do know one thing, our folks back then, I believe, lived more in harmony. Because what capitalism make you step on the next person. And listen, I have a business, I'm an entrepreneur, I have my own catering company, so guess what, I have to rely on capitalism. But what I am doing now is working with farmers to figure out how do we do a cooperative to say, all right, as Germaine said, you're going to college, you're going to okra, how do we, as a cooperative, put all these together, make our own products, and get that back into the community? So it's a great question. It's a question that I think as human beings, nothing will ever be perfect. I mean, we're a problem with the earth. Human beings are a problem with the earth. It's not, we're animals, we're the most intelligent animals, but we're the most problematic. Because we are the one that are fucking up this place. Excuse my language.
What I would say is same cooperative economics and really reimagining what that looks like outside of what we've been told. Some people talk about suits, but that doesn't feel right for everyone. I know in community, one of the things I'll come from a yoga or a healer perspective. And when I say healer, I don't mean in the sense of people are broken and need to fix them. I say that as a person that is trained to hold space for other people to engage their own healing and acknowledge their own work. And sometimes, actually oftentimes from ancient times, services like that were honored, where monks, healers would go up in the mountains and study and do the work that they needed to do. And it was the community that provided for them. It was the community that brought them clothing. It was the community that brought them food in exchange for their wisdom and spiritual guidance. And I think it's very much the same thing. If we go back and look at people's basic needs, I have yoga teachers that want to guide spaces, but they don't have the right food. So I go over to Germaine and I say, hey, how can we work out that we're holding healing spaces? How can we utilize our teacher that specifically is a doula? How can she show up in community and in exchange and make sure she has the groceries that she needs? Perhaps she's unable to cook. BJ, how can we work out where our food is delivered to this person and in exchange, we're able to provide a service that you or someone else needs? Farmers, people that are out there physically active, and that's one of the bigger reasons that I got in, that I really wanted to share the gift of yoga, because yoga is a healing practice. And it looks nice, but it's been capitalized on in the sense of, oh, just read your television and feel better when you leave this space. But if we can actually utilize yoga as a tool to help people regulate their own nervous systems, you won't be burnt out when capitalism tells you, go to school, go to work, go to church, do all of the things. You'll now have the tools for yourself to say, you know what, I can ground myself in this moment and I'm gonna keep going on. And so it's really being cooperative in the sense of partnering and not looking at resources beyond it being a financial resource. People are not resources, but they can be resourced. If I don't have the answer, Paul's got the answer, Germaine's got the answer, BJ's got the answer, Todd's got the answer. And we have to really get back to being in community and realizing that we are each other's resources, but we're gonna have to get beyond seeing resources as anything other than financial.
So thank you all for hanging out. First birthday was 1970, so we are 52 years later. And it's still got to work, it's ongoing. And I think one of the key messages, hopefully they overheard, even Sean's last great question, is community and resilience has to be part of that. It's us coming together, and that's what it's going to take. So Clayton's book will be for sale. He'll sign them. Come up and introduce yourselves. Thank you all for being here. Good luck with finals for those of you who are students. And John Morstrom, he runs facilities, is here. He'll listen to you. Tell your teachers you want to talk about this stuff and learn this stuff in class. Tell your teachers you want community leaders coming into the class to talk to you all. Tell your teachers you want to go volunteer and help out at these people's places. That's building community. CSC has to embed itself as servants, right? We can't just be coming in colonizers over your 4 to 5 years, right? And that's on people like me and John to create that context. So bring ideas to John, he's an ally in all this. And again, thank you all so much for being here tonight, sharing your passion, your strength and dignity. So thank you all for
Super awesome being here. I don't understand, like, it's like a big privilege for, like, native from like the prairies to come to the coast and hang out.